The amber eyes gleamed, but the fierce light of a warrior had faded. The bipolar desert leopard dragged each heavy step, her once sleek coat now worn and ragged, her body nearly devoid of strength. Every movement was slow, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. Her two cubs stumbled, their tiny legs unsteady, struggling to follow their mother. She could barely lift her head, yet still, she extended her long, thin tail, a feeble barrier between them and the harsh world around them. They whimpered weakly, but there was only silence in return. She looked down at them with eyes filled with despair, and in that gaze there was an unspoken vow. I won't let you go. The cold, barren moon of Xarx stretched out in endless rocky plains under a bleak sky. Once it was a lush place full of life, but war had destroyed it. Now it was just a forgotten outpost for alien groups that had moved on. Near a jagged cliffside, a huge desert leopard and her two young cubs huddled together, fighting against the strong winds that swept through the canyons. The leopard, known as a bipolar desert leopard, was a creature made by the Galactic League for fighting. With her sleek, dark fur, powerful body, and glowing amber eyes, she was built to kill. But the League thought she was too wild. When the fight on Xarx ended, they left her and her cubs without a second thought. The mother leopard, whom the leopard keepers had once called Nyx, let out a low, sad growl. Her two cubs, shivering and huddled close, whimpered back. In this harsh place, survival was almost impossible for a species made for pack life and teamwork. She couldn't leave her cubs to find food, and they were too young to hunt themselves. Nyx knew that if help didn't come soon, her family wouldn't last much longer. Her growl echoed through the rocky land, unheard and fading into the cold night air. But on the edge of Xarx, someone had heard. Sergeant Kaelen Vance, a seasoned soldier stationed at a lonely outpost on Xarx, was doing a routine scan of the nearby areas. His job was to look for any signs of life, usually leftover stragglers or machines from the abandoned League fleet. Xarx was his last assignment before going back to Earth, and he wanted it to be over. That evening, as Kaelen looked at his scanner, something strange showed up. A faint, pulsing signal, meaning there was life. It was odd in such an empty area. Curious, he set up the scanner, following the source. After a short trip across the rocky ground, he got close to the area and stopped, hiding behind a nearby boulder. As he watched from a distance, in the faint light of Xarx's twin moons, he saw them, a massive leopard-like creature, her fur matted and tangled, with two small cubs by her side. Kaelen knew her species right away, a bipolar desert leopard, a rare and dangerous breed made by the League. He'd read reports about how fierce these beasts were, creatures made for war, known for their strength, smarts, and strong bonds. But something was different. This wasn't the scary fighting beast he'd imagined. The leopard was weak, her ribs showing under her rough fur, and her once bright amber eyes looked dull and tired. Her cubs, barely big enough to stand, huddled against her, their small bodies shaking. Kaelen's heart sank as he realized what had happened. The League had abandoned her here. She was just a victim of their failed plan, left to die on this empty moon. He stepped forward, carefully, letting her know he was there, but moving slowly and gently. Nyx raised her head, her eyes narrowing as she let out a low growl, putting herself in front of her cubs to protect them. But her growl was weak, and Kaelen could tell she was about to collapse. Easy there, he whispered, lowering himself to look less threatening. I'm not here to hurt you. He reached into his bag and pulled out a canteen of water, putting it down on the ground in front of him before moving back a few steps. The mother leopard watched him carefully, but her need to survive won out. She nudged the canteen with her nose, sniffing it cautiously before taking a careful drink, her cubs following her lead. Kaelen watched them, a mix of sadness and determination filling him. These were creatures made for war, yet left without care. Despite her fierceness, the mother leopard's protective instincts for her cubs were very familiar to him. She wasn't just a weapon, she was a mother fighting for her family's survival against impossible odds. As Nyx finished drinking, she looked up at him, her amber eyes studying him with a careful trust. In that moment, Kaelen knew he couldn't leave them here to die. His job might be to watch this empty rock, but his heart wouldn't let him walk away. He stood up, looking back toward his outpost. Stay here, he whispered, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping she'd sense what he meant. I'll be back. With that, he headed back, making a plan in his mind. He'd bring supplies, food, anything they needed. Against every rule and order he'd been given, Kaelen was determined to save the leopard and her cubs, no matter the cost. The next morning, Kaelen packed his bag with whatever supplies he could find from the outpost. Ration bars, another canteen, and a few thermal blankets. With each step back to the leopard's den, he braced himself, hoping the mother leopard, Nyx, would remember that he meant no harm. He moved carefully as he approached the familiar, rocky spot, letting her know he was there before she saw him. Nyx lifted her head, her amber eyes watching him with a careful smartness, still partly guarded but no longer hostile. Her two cubs, sensing her change, remained curled up by her side, watching Kaelen with curiosity. "Easy, girl," he whispered, setting his supplies on the ground and moving back a few steps. He took out a ration bar, unwrapping it and tossing a piece a few feet away from him. The smell caught the attention of the cubs, who sniffed the air, interested. One of them, a little ball of fur with bright, tiny eyes, whom he'd come to think of as Styx, slowly moved toward the food, encouraged by a gentle nudge from its mother. Kaelen waited still as the cub came closer. It sniffed the ration bar before taking a careful bite, and then another, its hunger overcoming its fear. The second cub, seeing its sibling was safe, whom he'd mentally dubbed Saul, joined in, and soon both were eating the food quickly. Nyx watched them closely, and when Kaelen offered a second piece, she slowly lowered her head, sniffing the offering before taking it. The powerful beast, once made for war, was now just a shadow of her former self, a mother fighting for survival for her cub's sake. Kalen's heart tightened as he watched her eat, his resolve to save them growing stronger with every look. Over the next few hours, he stayed nearby, talking to them in a low, calm voice, sharing bits of his own story. He knew that while they couldn't understand his words, they could feel his intentions. As the day went on, Nyx's tension eased, and she let him sit a bit closer, her gaze steady but no longer hostile. The cubs, sensing the change in their mother, grew bolder, moving closer to Kaelen, their eyes full of curiosity. As the sun set over the empty landscape, Kaelen wrapped a thermal blanket around himself and settled in for the night, refusing to leave their side. Nyx curled protectively around her cubs, casting one last glance his way before closing her eyes. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. He was in this for the long haul. Their survival was now his mission. The following morning, Kaelen woke to find the cubs moving even closer, their small noses sniffing at his gear. Nyx watched from a few feet away, her body relaxed as she observed his every move. They were starting to trust him, a fragile but growing bond that Kaelen was determined to nurture. He slowly extended his hand toward the cubs, his movements careful and steady. The smaller of the two, Styx, sniffed his fingers before giving them a careful nudge. Her sibling, Saul, hung back but watched with keen interest. Encouraged, Kaelen offered another piece of a ration bar, holding it out in his hand. Styx took it eagerly, her tiny teeth crunching through the food as she looked up at him with those bright, trusting eyes. Saul, seeing his sister way safe, edged forward and sniffed Kaelen's hand before carefully taking a piece for himself. Nyx watched, a low rumble of approval vibrating in her throat. Kaelen looked up at her, meeting her gaze with quiet respect. "You're not just a beast, are you?" he said softly. "You're a mother doing everything you can to keep them safe. And I'm going to help you do that." As the days passed, Kaelen returned daily, bringing food, water, and supplies. He'd even managed to find a few more thermal blankets to help them through the cold Xarx nights. Each visit deepened the bond between him and the leopard family. Nyx let him get closer to her cubs, her growls becoming softer, almost a greeting rather than a warning. One afternoon, he took a brave step, slowly extending his hand toward Nyx herself. She tensed, her eyes narrowing as she thought about his gesture. But after a moment's hesitation, she lowered her head and let him place his hand on her thick fur. It was a small, careful touch, but the warmth of her fur and the steady beat of her breathing connected them in a way that words never could. From that moment on, Kaelen knew their bond was real. The once fierce beast was starting to trust him, not just as a source of food, but as a friend. Her amber eyes, once cold and wary, softened slightly each time he came close, and she even let him sit beside her as she watched over her cubs. But Kaelen knew this fragile peace couldn't last forever. His actions would eventually be noticed by his bosses, and his care for the leopards was a break of rules that wouldn't be taken lightly. He was a soldier bound by rules, and his bosses saw creatures like Nyx as little more than engineered tools, useful only when controlled. Yet every time he looked at the small cubs playing and tumbling around his feet, and the fierce, devoted gaze of their mother, he knew he could never abandon them, no matter what orders he received, no matter the consequences. He would do everything he could to protect this family. Days turned into weeks as Kaelen continued his daily visits to Nyx and her cubs, making sure they had enough food and water to survive the harsh conditions of Xarx. Each day, his bond with the leopards grew stronger. The cubs had grown bolder, playfully pawing at his boots and nosing his hands for treats, while Nyx had started lying nearby, her gaze no longer suspicious but almost protective. She was no longer just putting up with him. She saw him as part of their pack. However, Kaelen knew he was walking a fine line. His bosses were becoming suspicious, noticing his longer patrols each day and his use of extra rations. While they hadn't confronted him yet, he felt it was only a matter of time before someone would demand answers. One cold evening, as he sat with Nyx and the cubs under the dim light of Xarx's moons, he realized he couldn't just leave them to fend for themselves. Xarx was a brutal place, and without him, the leopards wouldn't last. If he was going to keep them safe, he would need a long-term plan. The only solution was to move them. He knew of a sanctuary planet, Lumina, known for taking in abandoned or endangered alien species. It was far, and getting the needed permission would be almost impossible, but it was the only hope for Nyx and her cubs. As he made his plan, he knew he couldn't do it alone. Later that night, he sent a secret message to Dr. Kaelen Vance, an old friend and a xenobiologist dedicated to preserving alien species. She had always fought for animal rights, and if anyone would understand the importance of saving Nyx and her cubs, it would be her. The next day, a secure reply came through from Dr. Vance. "Kaelen, are you crazy?" Her message began, full of worry, but ending with, "But you know I can't say no to a challenge. I'll bring the equipment, but this has to be off the record. Command won't ignore this." And they arranged for her to arrive pretending to do routine medical checks. She landed in a small, unmarked transport ship, keeping her presence secret. When she met the leopards for the first time, her reaction was immediate awe. "They're magnificent," she whispered, coming closer carefully. "I've read about bipolar desert leopards, but seeing them up close..." Nyx watched her carefully, but sensing Kaelen's comfort around Alara, allowed her to approach. The cubs, Styx and Saul, playful as ever, curiously sniffed at Alara's hand, their noses twitching as they took in her scent. Alara's face softened, and she turned to Kaelen, her voice a mix of concern and admiration. "You did the right thing, Kaelen. They deserve a chance at life beyond this wasteland." With Alara's help, they got ready for the move. She gave Nyx and the cubs a mild sedative to keep them calm during the trip, and they carefully loaded the leopards into a strong transport bay, set up with comfy bedding, food, and water. Just as they finished, an urgent ping echoed from Kaelen's communicator. Command had found unauthorized transport activity in his sector. "They're on to us," Kaelen muttered, his heart racing. "We need to get out of here now." As they got on the ship, Kaelen took the controls while Alara handled communications, quickly typing in false coordinates to throw off any pursuers. The transport's engines roared to life, and they took off, speeding away from Xarx as fast as they could. But Command wouldn't give up. Within minutes, a patrol ship appeared on their radar, getting close fast. "They're not giving up," Alara said, her voice tense. "They'll catch up to us at this rate." Kaelen gritted his teeth, guiding the ship toward a thick blood moon nebula. "Hold tight, we're going through." Alara's eyes widened. "That's crazy!" But Kaelen was determined. He expertly steered the ship through the maze of swirling clouds, using them as cover, forcing the patrol to slow down to avoid hitting them. Nyx, barely awake from the sedative, lifted her head and let out a low, comforting growl, as if sensing Kaelen's determination. After what felt like forever, they finally broke free from the nebula, the patrol ship lost behind them. They both let out a breath of relief, and Alara managed a shaky laugh. "I'll never doubt your piloting skills again, Kaelen." "Neither will I," he replied with a grin, though his heart was still pounding. He glanced back at Nyx and the cubs, who were slowly waking from the sedative, their eyes blinking in the dim light. They were safe for now, but the journey wasn't over yet. As they continued toward Lumina, Kaelen looked back at Nyx and her cubs, feeling a fierce pride in what they'd done. They were beating the odds together, forming a bond that was as strong as any he'd ever known. No matter the challenges ahead, Kaelen was ready to face them, as long as it meant giving Nyx, Styx, and Saul the life they deserved. The journey to Lumina was far from smooth. Command wasn't going to overlook Kaelen's actions, especially now that he'd taken the Bipolar Desert Leopards into his own care. Within hours of leaving Xarx, Alara's sensors picked up another patrol ship following them. The chase wasn't over. "We're not going to lose them easily this time," Alara warned, her fingers dancing over the control panel as she looked at their options. Kaelen checked the navigation. They were getting close to the Blood Moon Nebula, a very dense and confusing area that could mess up a ship's systems if they weren't careful. But he knew it was their only chance. "We'll go through the nebula," he decided, his voice firm. "It's risky, but they'll have a hard time tracking us in there." Alara's eyes widened. "Kaelen, that's almost suicide." He glanced back at the cargo bay where Nyx lay beside her cubs, watching him with that steady, fierce gaze that had come to mean trust. He couldn't let them fall back into the hands of those who saw them as disposable weapons. "They trusted me to protect them," he said quietly, meeting Alara's gaze. "I'm not letting them down now." With a determined nod, Alara changed their course, and the ship shot into the nebula. Bright, swirling clouds of gas surrounded them, pink and violet colors glinting with bursts of starlight. As they entered the thickest part, the ship's sensors went crazy, blinking and buzzing with interference. Their visibility was almost gone, and Kaelen had to rely on instinct and Alara's careful guidance to steer. They slowed down, moving carefully through the clouds, hoping the patrol would lose their trail. For tense minutes, they drifted in near silence, except for the soft hum of the engines. In the cargo bay, Nyx lay protectively over her cubs, her ears twitching as if she knew the danger around them. Styx whimpered softly, nestling close to her mother, while Saul kept a careful watch, his sharp eyes fixed on Kaelen, as if sensing his determination. Finally, the patrol ship's signal faded from their radar. "We lost them," Alara whispered, relief filling her voice. Kaelen let out a breath, his hands shaking slightly as he set their course back to Lumina. "Let's keep moving, just in case they pick up our trail again." As they left the nebula, the stars opened up before them, and a calm settled over the ship. They were finally free of their pursuers, at least for now. Kaelen leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of the journey but also a fierce pride that they were one step closer to freedom. Alara glanced at him, a smile playing on her lips. "You did it, Kaelen. We're almost there." He looked back at Nyx, who let out a soft, grateful rumble, her gaze steady and fierce. They were closer than ever to a new beginning. Despite their success in avoiding the patrol, news of Kaelen's actions spread quickly across the galactic channels. As they got close to Lumina, he received an official message from the Galactic Union Council. He was to appear for a formal hearing to explain his disobedience and unauthorized actions. The future of Nyx and her cubs hung in the balance. Upon arriving on Lumina, Kaelen and Alara were led to the council chambers, where officials from many species awaited them. The story of the desert leopards had started a heated debate across the galaxy, dividing opinions. Some saw Kaelen as a hero who had saved innocent creatures from being abandoned, while others saw him as reckless, risking lives by bringing a dangerous species into a sanctuary. The council hall was full of people watching, reporters, and officials. At the front of the chamber, a tall, serious-looking council member with silver eyes and a powerful presence named Vorian addressed him. "Sergeant Vance," Vorian began, his voice echoing across the hall, "you stand accused of disobeying direct orders, hurting mission integrity, and moving unclassified alien life forms without permission. What do you have to say for yourself?" Kaelen took a deep breath, meeting Vorian's gaze with steady conviction. Nyx and her cubs are not just unclassified life forms. They're smart, loyal, and capable of trust and connection. The Kaelen League left them to die on Xarx after using them for war. They deserved more than that. They deserved a chance to live. A murmur ran through the audience, and Vorian's eyes narrowed. "You put your personal feelings above rules. How can we trust that these creatures are not a threat to others?" Alara stepped forward, her voice calm but passionate. "I'm a xenobiologist with a lot of experience in alien species preservation, and I can say that bipolar desert leopards can form social bonds and be loyal. They were only dangerous because they were treated as weapons. Kaelen saw their potential for more. Another council member, an elder from the empathetic Cryan species, raised her hand to speak. Sergeant Vance, you say they can be trusted. How did you come to this conclusion? Kaelen told the story of his days with the leopards on Xarx, describing Nyx's protection over her cubs, their slow trust in him, and the times they let him be part of their family. Nyx is a mother first and foremost. She cares for her cubs with the same dedication any of us would for our families. She trusted me because I showed her kindness and respect. She protected me as much as I protected her. The Cryan elder nodded thoughtfully, while the council exchanged glances, clearly moved by his words. But Vorian remained stiff. While your story is convincing, this council must put safety above feelings. Whether they are thinking or not, these creatures are unlike any known in the galaxy. The risk they pose cannot be ignored. At that moment, a voice rang out from the audience, a young xenobiologist who had followed the case closely. Counselors, if we deny these creatures a chance at freedom, we're denying the galaxy a chance to learn more about thinking life. They deserve to be seen for who they are, not judged only by where they came from. Applause rippled through the crowd, and others echoed the feeling, calling for the council to rethink. After a long pause, Vorian raised his hand for silence. The council will decide. Kaelen and Alara waited in tense silence as the council members talked behind closed doors. When they finally returned, Vorian addressed the chamber. After careful thought, we have reached a decision. Sergeant Kaelen Vance, you will not face punishment. Furthermore, Nyx and her cubs will be given asylum on Lumina under the watch of the Galactic Preservation Society. This arrangement will be reviewed every year, with the hope that it sets a standard for how we treat thinking beings, no matter where they came from. The chamber erupted in cheers, and Kaelen felt a huge wave of relief and thanks. Nyx, Styx, and Sol were free, and their story had started a movement toward kindness across the galaxy. As he and Alara left the council chamber, a crowd gathered to thank them, and Kaelen realized that his actions had inspired a change far greater than he'd ever imagined. The leopards he had saved weren't just survivors, they were symbols of a new time, one in which even the most dangerous creatures had a chance to live in peace. With the council's decision in place, Nyx and her cubs were officially given asylum on Lumina, where vast natural sanctuaries offered them the space and freedom to live as they pleased. Kaelen went with them to their new home, guiding them through the open grasslands, forests, and gentle rivers that stretched across the sanctuary planet. Nyx's eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and careful excitement as she explored her new territory, her cubs bounding around her with playful energy. Kaelen watched as Styx and Sol, now more confident than ever, wrestled and chased each other through the tall grass. For the first time since he had found them, they were no longer fighting for survival. They were simply living. Nyx, once a fierce protector against all threats, began to relax, her sharp gaze softening as she took in the gentle, non-threatening surroundings of Lumina. Dr. Alara Vance stayed on Lumina to help Kaelen adjust the leopards to their new environment. She had prepared a space within the sanctuary where visitors could watch Nyx and her cubs from a respectful distance, hoping their story would inspire a new appreciation for the complex nature of alien life. One evening, as the sun set in twin streaks of red and gold, Kaelen sat with Alara on a hill overlooking the sanctuary. They watched Nyx playfully nudge her cubs, showing them how to hunt in the safer, prey-filled land. The leopards were thriving, and Kaelen's heart swelled with pride. "You know, I never thought things would turn out like this," Kaelen said, a trace of wonder in his voice. "When I found them on Xarx, all I wanted was to give them a fighting chance. I never expected to be part of something so big." Alara nodded, her gaze warm. "What you did, Kaelen, wasn't just about saving Nyx and her cubs. You changed how the galaxy sees them and creatures like them. You gave the council a reason to rethink their own biases." They fell into a comfortable silence, watching as Styx and Sol curled up beside their mother, drifting off to sleep under the vast, star-filled sky. Kaelen felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He had come to Xarx as a soldier trained to follow orders, but he was leaving Lumina as something much more, a guardian and a voice for beings once thought unworthy of kindness. The story of Nyx, Styx, and Sol spread across the galaxy, and they quickly became symbols of strength, loyalty, and the importance of second chances. Beings from countless species visited Lumina, drawn by the story of the human soldier who had ignored rules to protect a family of alien leopards. People from all walks of life gathered at the sanctuary, learning not only about the bipolar desert leopards, but also about kindness and living together. On Lumina, the sanctuary grew, opening more habitats for abandoned and endangered creatures. Visitors marveled at Nyx's noble presence, Styx's careful curiosity, and Saul's playful antics. The leopards were no longer seen as scary weapons. They were beings with feelings, intelligence, and a capacity for connection. People left the sanctuary with a new understanding of how important empathy is and a promise to fight against leaving thinking creatures alone. One day, a young boy visiting from a nearby star system came up to Kaelen, his eyes wide with excitement. "Is it true, Sergeant Vance?" he asked. "Did you really save them all by yourself?" Kaelen smiled, kneeling to meet the boy's gaze. "I didn't save them alone. They saved me, too. They taught me that bravery isn't just about fighting. It's about standing up for those who can't protect themselves. And they showed me that sometimes family is more than just who you're born with, it's who you fight for." The boy nodded, looking over at Nyx and her cubs, who were relaxing peacefully in the grass, their bond as strong as ever. That evening, as the stars glittered over the sanctuary, Kaelen and Alara took one last walk through the sanctuary grounds. They watched as Nyx lifted her head, her eyes reflecting the starlight, and let out a long, proud howl, a sound of freedom and strength that echoed across the land. Styx and Saul joined in, their voices blending with their mothers in a harmonious call. Alara leaned closer to Kaelen, her voice soft. "You did something amazing, Kaelen. You showed the galaxy what it means to be truly brave." Kaelen smiled, his gaze on Nyx and her cubs. "We all have a duty to protect what's vulnerable, to stand by those who need it. I may have started this journey for Nyx, but now I'm here for every creature like her." As they walked back toward the sanctuary's entrance, Kaelen felt a huge sense of purpose. The leopards he had saved had given him a reason to fight for more than just himself, to work toward a future where every life, no matter how dangerous or different, could be seen as worthy. Together, Kaelen, Alara, Nyx, Styx, and Saul had created a legacy, one that would inspire generations to come. They were no longer just a soldier, a scientist, and a family of alien leopards. They were guardians of the forgotten, champions of kindness, and pioneers of a future where empathy reached beyond the stars. As the stars glittered above Lumina, Kaelen watched Nyx and her cubs, no longer just survivors, but symbols of strength and hope. In this new world, they were free, safe, and loved, a family bound not by blood, but by their shared will to survive. Nyx, once a weapon of war, now embraced her role as a mother, and Kaelen stood by her side, knowing he had given them a chance at life they never thought possible. Just like Nyx's fight for her cubs, every story we share here is a fight for survival, hope, and connection. If you were moved by their story, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a moment of these powerful tales of strength and resilience. If you believe in the power of love, family, and survival, go ahead and like this video. It helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them, and let's spread the message of hope and strength far and wide. Thank you for watching, and remember, together we can inspire and make a difference. Stay tuned for more incredible stories coming your way.